choose to wear a tablecloth, that is my business, sir. I don't look into you about the apricot jacket. So let me be dressed by Ray's Outdoors, and you can have your business. Anyway, I love it. All right, the Great Band, of course, back on Monday night. Now, I don't think there is a better person to talk about what's been happening in South Australia than this bloke who found a Sky News camera today in the desolate streets of Adelaide.
You know what? This lockdown is the greatest of this universe.
Joining us, along with Katie Page, about those China Awards. We'll be going to regional Queensland a little bit later in the show. Also, what about this bloke, okay? This is motivational speech, just while we're getting ready during it. You know what Alan says? You should never wear checks on TV. Well, if I choose to wear a tablecloth, that is my business, sir. I don't hook into you about the apricot jacket. So let me be dressed by Ray's Outdoors, and you can have your business. Anyway, I love it. All right, the Great Band, of course, back on Monday night. Now, I don't think there is a better person to talk about what's been happening in South Australia than this bloke who found a Sky News camera today in the desolate streets of Adelaide.
You know what? This lockdown is the greatest of this universe. It doesn't achieve any and they're locking us in our own home. They imprison us in our own home for nothing.
Hallelujah, sir. Hallelujah, sir. Now, as you know, when Victoria eventually got to 0 cases, it wasn't just big news here, it was big news around the world. It was being reported by, Qatari news agencies. It was being reported by English news agencies as well. Well, what took the best part of almost 5 months to achieve in Victoria was achieved today in South Australia in less than 12 hours. They were 12.
We have no new cases to report, and I'm really pleased with that news. But you might be saying, why have we got no new cases, and yet I'm not able to get out of the house? So it's my job to explain that to you.
Oh, really? Could you do it in a really patronising fashion that would be more akin to a children's television presenter than a highly paid public official? Record testing yesterday, 0 cases. Now, despite the fact that there are no new cases, despite the fact that this is not a bushfire, it is a grass fire at best, and their response to it is to throw nukes at it so they can all turn around and say, yeah, South Australia proud, hashtag, didn't we do well, we kept you safe, don't forget to vote in 2022. You know what this is really about. Yet again, here we go, again, and still, Premier Marshmallow is justifying the fact that people watching us in South Australia, even if they are in Murray Bridge, even if they are in Unadilla, even if they are on the border, that they must stay in their house and cannot exercise for another 5 days.
The alternative is the virus escapes into the wider community and we're forced into an extended lockdown to bring it under control. The lessons of surging infections in Victoria and other parts of the world have been learned. Indecision plays into the hands of this virus.
Oh, what rubbish. When you sit there and you chew it up and you love it, and you clap them on, and how good is all of this? It's rubbish. You know it's rubbish, and I know it's rubbish. Of course, COVID isn't rubbish. COVID is serious. COVID must be taken care of. COVID must be dealt with. COVID must be confronted. But this is not hundreds of cases. It's not even as many as the Crossroads Hotel that I told you about last night. In fact, quite amazingly, it's not even as many cases as the lady from Romper Room wants you to believe are the number of cases in this cluster.
And we've also got 17 suspected cases which we are treating as cases. So with all of the 23 cases and the 17 suspected cases, what we are doing is putting a double ring fence around all of those people.
And literally, after she put out that press conference, the Department of Health in South Australia this afternoon put out this press release. This press release, which was your COVID-19 update. The date was Thursday, the 19th of November 2020. The people of South Australia were locked inside their homes, desperate for information from the state government as they keep us safe. Well, it confirmed that there are no new cases But when you actually read down in the press release, it said that one of the cases they were counting isn't actually a case of coronavirus at all. So one of the reasons for the justification for you to be stuck in your house for 6 days, guess what? Poof, disappears after it's been sent to the laboratory for extra investigation. And then my favourite bit of nonsense from the children's television host in South Australia is, remember that despite the fact that Sydney Airport and New South Wales has been taking thousands and thousands and thousands of people from all over the world. They've even been taking them in Perth, not as many. They've even been taking them in Brisbane, not as many. But apparently a super special version of the virus. We call this the Radelaide strain. Apparently this was a special mutated version that was even worse than what was happening in Wuhan or Booga or Tame.
This particular strain has had certain characteristics. It has a very, very short incubation period. That means when somebody gets exposed, it's taking 24 hours or even less for that person to become infectious to others. It cemented my fears that this virus is breeding very, very rapidly.
Thank you so much. But guess what? Even the Toowoomba Times is calling bullshit. Experts are coming forward to a lefty paper of record to suggest they doubt that there's a particularly sneaky strain that didn't turn up anywhere else. It didn't turn up in Los Angeles. It wasn't there in New York. It wasn't in deepest, darkest Africa. No, it's the Radelaide strain. And as I remind you, COVID is serious. COVID must be taken seriously. But there has to be a recognition by the public health officials that the difference between a rice fire and a bushfire, the difference between a little flare-up and her quarantine failing day after day after day, week after week after week in Victoria. As I said, the Crossroads Hotel. This was a few months ago. This was somewhere between the first and the non-existent second wave in New South Wales. There were more than 40 cases that were connected to this. They didn't even close the street, let alone the suburb, let alone the council area, let alone the city, let alone the state. And the national health officials, while they are saying the right things because you don't want to throw other experts under the bus, well, they can't quite hide that they think this is a little too much. This was from the far right-wing website called the Abacus, and it says that South Australia has gone hard and fast, but it doesn't meet the definition of the hotspot. This was a national definition that was agreed to by National Cabinet, where guess what? Premier Marshmallow was one of the people who agreed to it. So, there's not as many cases as they first thought. There are 0 cases to date. It's probably not the Radelaide strain of the virus. Yet this is what the capital of South Australia looked like today. Nothing, no one, there's no sound, everyone. Yet, I guarantee you, when this is over, and it will be over sooner rather than later, Premier Marshall's numbers will go through the roof. Chief Health Officer will be declared the South Australian of the Year. Hashtags will be everywhere, and of course people will be getting tattoos in the Adelaide Hills. Remember the lockdown of December 2020. I'm sorry if this pisses you off, but it is ridiculous. They are playing with the fools. And alas, the electorate in Queensland, next year in Western Australia, the Northern Territory proved people love this stuff. Also, I just want to show you about how far we have come and how weird things are in Australia. As you know, I've talked a lot about Queensland and the stupid sort of Goldilocks rules, that this is allowed, this isn't allowed, this isn't okay, this is okay, and how over the top some of the policing was. At the height of the non-existent second wave in Queensland, this is what they were using the police helicopter for. freaking having Coke Zero on the roof of the building on the Goldie. You're surrounded, you're surrounded. This was all part of the Wrap It Up campaign that, of course, the Queensland government was so richly rewarded for just a few weeks ago. Well, part of the rich rewarding for keeping you safe was the biggest crowd in all of world sport gathered last night at Suncorp Stadium to see a great victory. The Queensland Maroons over those evil blues, those diseased cockroaches from New South Wales. And many Palaszczuk voters were more than happy that no Blues fans were allowed. They weren't even going to allow Ray Warren to leave New South Wales to call the game. Such was their obsession with COVID safety. Despite the fact that, of course, the Chief Health Officer, another one of these locker room types, another one of these placement executives, which looks to you like different. Remember to socially distance. She's already said there's not going to be a second wave in Queensland because we have the same contact tracing system as New South Wales. But people went nuts. But Peter Dutton quite correctly pointed out today what a heck of a double standard that exists in Queensland. Now, because the Premier has kept you safe, the virus doesn't exist in Queensland. The children's television presenter, Doctor, says we're not going to have a second wave. Yet, if you have a funeral, there's still a limit on the number of people that can go there. That's something that Peter Dutton called out today, and well done to him for calling it out. No doubt it happened in Canberra because Queensland won at the foot. But there were lots of people. And when they lose a loved one, they also have the capacity to be able to sit in the song for less time than it takes to even play half.
Okay for the Premier of Queensland to make a decision of tens of thousands of people sitting next to each other at a football match. How does she justify not allowing somebody to go to the funeral of their mother or their son? It's just unacceptable, and it's for political reasons, and it needs to be called out. It's not for health reasons.
It's absurd. Of course, it's absurd. But COVID politics means people lose their brains. Well, I hope it's not you. Let's think about somebody else who's watching. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's you. But there's lots of people who secretly watching us right now. They fall for this crap all the time. They love it.
Hello, Alan.
Hello.
How are you?
For calling this out. I don't
I'm good.
Because COVID is
The first thing you do, to rest a little bit, 5 minutes.
Yes, you can rest.
2 minutes only, 2 minutes.
No, you can have 5 minutes.
How are you?
Good. I'm just recording this with my phone.
Perfect example. Again, overplacing of things. In California, they have had a serious problem. Because of their dense populations, because of a whole bunch of other factors, the cases have gone through the roof, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking about masks, distance, or anything else. Things keep getting worse and worse and worse in California, so much so that everything is policed, and they go Victorian style. These people were arrested for drinking in public. And the governor, well, his office told people that they should wear their mask, including when they sit down for dinner, and they should take the mask off when you put the food in, and then on when you chew it, and then off when you put more food, and then on when you chew it. And they're very serious about coronavirus. Unless, of course, the rules apply to them. I showed you this last night. Gavin Newsom is a very, very puffy figure. He loves himself, oh so deeply. Loved by the Democrats in the one-party state of California. This was a birthday party that he went to. There's one, two, there's no one wearing a mask. That allegedly was an outdoor dining event. Do they have chandeliers outside at your place? Not to mention the fact that, of course, there were people at this thing who actually represent the doctors of California. So they tell you to do something, they do something else. When he was caught, and remember he was caught, the oh-so-slippery bloke who looks like he's some sort of a ambulance-chasing lawyer, said this today on American television.
And as soon as I sat down at a larger table, I realized it was a little larger group than I had anticipated. And I made a bad mistake. Instead of sitting down, I should have stood up and walked back, got in my car, and drove back to my house. And instead, I chose to sit there with my wife and a number of other couples that were outside the household. We can quibble about the guidelines, et cetera, but the spirit of what I'm preaching all the time was contradictory. And I got to own that. And so I want to apologize to you because I need to preach and practice, not just preach and not practice. And I've done my best to do that.
But because he's a lefty, Bronwyn's are right. One rule for them, one rule for everybody else. Like blackface Trudeau up there in Canada, who was a conservative. You get life, he gets another term. The one-party state of California means this bloke will go around and just like Premier Marshmallow and Princess Palaszczuk, Emperor McGowan, and Gutless Goodwin, they'll just all get re-elected and we're the heretics for speaking against them. Even the New York Times, called him out for this BS.
Hello.
And there was another example about how the power of COVID popularity can go to the head of the politician. And it will go to the head of every politician in Australia who knows to keep you scared, keeps them in a job. Andrew Cuomo is the governor of New York. He's a bloke who made decisions to put people who had coronavirus back into nursing homes. That decision genuinely killed me. This bloke, look what happens when he gets asked a question by somebody he doesn't like. And then think back to old Chairman Dan and how he used to treat the women who work for this company when they asked questions that he didn't like.
What are you talking about? You're now going to override. We did it already. That's the law. An orange zone and a red zone. Follow the facts. Well, then you're confused. Then I'll tell you what you mean.
Parents are still confused as well.
No, they're not confused. You're confused. Read the law. Read the law, and you won't be confused. Well, I don't really care what you think.
Imagine the word clock and take out the L. Like, seriously. What a punce. And by the way, he was being questioned about whether or not schools were going to close. And guess what happened? After the press conference, they announced the schools were closed. Just like after the press conference in South Australia today. One of the cases that justified the lockdown. Yet we're the crazy ones when we call them out for what they are. Power drunk. And they're popularity drunk too, and that comes because way too many people love them for this stuff. Now, like anyone with a heart and a patriotic head, Harvard broke today, hearing the allegations about what Australian soldiers have apparently done on the battlefield in Afghanistan. It is inexcusable and there must be consequences as a result of it. If you've only read part of it, here is most of the allegations from Trudy McIntosh and Kerry.
Revelations that have rocked the Australian Defence Force.
Today, the Australian Defence Force is rightly held to account.
The Chief of Defence releasing the damning findings of the 4-year secretive investigation into alleged war crimes in Afghanistan.
To the people of Afghanistan, I sincerely and unreservedly apologise.
Justice Paul Brereton found that 39 individuals were unlawfully killed and 2 others cruelly treated. 25 current and former ADF personnel have been implicated, with 19 now set to face criminal investigation. The report stresses none of the 23 incidents occurred in the heat of battle and found that the majority of victims were captured and should have been protected under international law.
And the reaction has been obvious and absolutely justified. This is Heston Russell, who is a retired Special Forces commander.
The true test of culture is during crisis, and I got to see some individuals and teams perform to the most magnificent levels of human courage and sacrifice. At the same time, war and exposure to such conflict can indeed corrupt and bring out the worst, and we've seen that, and we're now dealing with that.
This is the Prime Minister.
I think that the high esteem in which we hold our Defence Forces is earned. It has been earned over more than a century, and that stands and firmly. And it stands for a number of reasons. The first of which is the obvious great acts of our Defence Forces over many, many years, and their selflessness and their service, and the choice that is made by serving men and women to pull on that uniform and to serve their country in the way they do. From that moment on, they have earned our respect and their conduct beyond that.
And our dear friend Jim Molan talking with our other dear friend Eddie Redland.
What happened today was very, very difficult, but it's the start of it's a continuation of the process, and that process is going to go for a long time.
And in amongst all of reasonable reactions to this, There are the opportunists who see this as the opportunity to somehow burst a mythical bubble. A mythical bubble that our defence forces are special people. The ones that we should get up for each and every Anzac Day, that we should pause for every Remembrance Day. And as I said, accountability is absolute. Nobody is above the law, no question, no grey area. But I will not let the industrial left do to the military what they were successfully able to do to the church and on atheists. Something where essentially they make it out that every priest was an abuser, or knew an abuser, or hid an abuser. Every person who sits in the pews is enabling the abuser. Here's just some of the opinion pieces that popped around on the internet today. Afghanistan war crimes report a nasty but necessary reckoning of a shameful recent history. This was Andrew Probe. The digger mythology that's long sustained Australia's self-image has been shaken by a murderous few with maximum firepower and discretion and minimum oversight. This is a big national moment. It is a nasty, necessary reckoning of a shameful recent history. Alternable times. We knew the war crimes inquiry would be bad, but this is gut-wrenching.
I'm still recording.
A shameful lie that changes Australia.
What?
You can still play.
I know, but I want to upload it to YouTube.
Oh.
Unemployment. It's good news today. About 180,000 people have got a job back. Most of them, of course, a mix of casual and full-time, but this is good. Good news, right? The national unemployment rate, however, does tick up ever so slightly as more people return to the workforce. But I want you to just have a look at something and remember what we've talked about for a long time. The national unemployment rate is 7%. The one in Queensland is still higher, yet that government was rehired, don't say it anymore. New South Wales is 6.5% and down 1.2% in 1 month.
What's my first thing to do?
One state is locked down,
Wiping
one
here.
state knows how to get out of that price. And finally, I just want to do a little wrap of things that have happened in the United States, but perhaps some stuff that you have not seen or read anywhere, because, of course, there is a blackout on anything but the coronation of Joe Biden. Now, you know, I've gone through the 5 stages of briefing. You know where I've been, and I still coach you for it every single day. But why do people refuse to believe the result that they have been told has been given? Well, in part because there's process. And just because a television station says this state's been won or that state's been won, that's not actually the process. The process is that eventually a series of people sign off on the vote, and then they then decide in the state parliaments who gets to go and represent that state at the electoral college. Now, this is the area where those who believe there's something crook about this election believe that things can either be overturned or put right if, say, state-based Republicans vote to say, well, hey, there's a lot of crook in this, so once you take the crook out, Trump won, we vote to send Trump delegates to the electoral college. That's either the play, the game, or the strategy. It's being played out on American television like this.
It is a media fabrication. The results have not been certified. Joe Biden at one point promised he would not declare victory until the election was certified. That has not happened. The electors have not met. We do not have a president-elect.
And despite the fact that most of the media will tell you all day, every day, there's no evidence, there's nothing exists, it's all bullshit, it's all a right-wing fake. You think this lady's fake? This lady was working in one of the poll stations, and what she says about how dodgy ballots were being counted for Biden. This is her evidence. It's sworn that if she's lying, she's committed a crime.
This ballot came up, this person voted for Joe Biden and the Green Party candidate. And the woman, she just passed it through to Joe Biden. That section should be isolated and thrown out.
So this person voted for 2 presidential candidates?
Right.
Biden and the Green Party.
Right. But the woman at the adjudication table, some of them moved real fast, so it didn't give us enough time to challenge it.
So because of statements like that, what you are now seeing is people whose job it is to certify the result, saying that they won't certify the result. That either there should be not just a recount, but what's called a audit, to go back through and make sure that the vote is a legal vote. What? That process and goes.
Hello, Dean.
Hello.
I'm just recording Paul Murray to put it on YouTube.
The process, because that is what is actually happening. And can I show you a document here which comes from a couple of the people whose job it was to sign off on the election? in one of these states. Now, they said they weren't going to do it, then they got bullied into saying that they would do it, and now they're saying we can't and we are not going to do it. Which means one of these states could well be delayed. It then goes to the state parliament and it goes around and around and around. So this is where the media blackout is dangerous, because they should be telling you what is happening in the process. Agree or disagree, they should tell you what's happening. And what about this for an MSNBC host, who basically says that Trump is trying to steal the election by trying to force an audit, not a recount of the votes.
Trump is flat out suing for the presidency. Just a short time ago, the wake of Rudy Giuliani's stumbling appearance in federal court in Pennsylvania yesterday, the Trump campaign filed amended complaints in which they asked the court to nullify the will of the people, prevent Pennsylvania from certifying its own election results, and have a judge declare Trump the victor and/or mandate that, quote, the results of the 2020 presidential general election are defective and provide for the Pennsylvania General Assembly to choose Pennsylvania's elector.
And on the other side of things, there are those that are willing to say, well, maybe this was a crooked process, because they've heard enough stories like that lady that you saw before.
All these irregularities, as usual, go in one direction. And just a week ago, we were told from everybody that there was no evidence, and now that there is evidence, now we're being told, well, yeah, there's evidence, but there's not enough evidence. Meanwhile, they made this whole election a battle of good versus evil, right? So of course they're going to cheat. If you're up against Darth Vader, Hitler, of course you're going to do it.
Process, people, that's what is not a conspiracy theory. It's what is playing out right now in the United States, county by county, council by council, polling booth by polling booth, still playing. Results, I don't know, for a long time. Well, again, congratulations to everyone in South Australia. You did what Victoria took months to do. You did in 12 hours what it took them months to do in Victoria. You killed the damn Wu flu. Here were the people of Adelaide reacting to being locked down, but somehow out of their house.
I'm really happy that they've gone in early, and I think it's going to save us a lot of pain in the long run.
It's best to get on top of things before it gets out of hand, I strongly agree with it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty necessary. Don't want anyone else to really get the this.
Yeah, it's one stuff, and can't act like a bit of a ghost town lately. They're driving to work this morning.
I agree with the first bloke that we showed you. Chris Kenny is a proud South Australian. Mate, congratulations. I know you're in hotel quarantine, but mate, South Australia did in 12 hours what Victoria took 4 months to do. Well, South Australia's strong, mate. Well done.
Oh, mate, I'll tell you what, I hate people who leave South Australia and bag it. I'm a proud South Australian, as you know, but it's been bloody hard this year with the Crows being so pathetic, and now this. I mean, honestly, there's 0 infections today. In fact, it was -1 today because they said they had 23 yesterday and brought them back to. And none of these people are sick. I understand that they say 3 of them are in hospital, but that's because they're elderly, so it's.
Oh, I don't forget to clean the stuff in there and inside of it as well, okay? Yeah, in there. And in that one as well. Thank you, Alan.
Particularly frightening because there's no symptoms. Imagine that. A sickness that doesn't make you sick and therefore is frightening. I mean, the country's gone nuts. I spoke to a bloke today who lost $80,000 in hotel room bookings just in South Australia just this week. These are businesses that have struggled all year through earlier lockdowns and are struggling to keep people in a job. $80,000 wiped off by this madness from Stephen Marshall, and so many of the population flat up. Why? Because they think they're scared of this virus. They're not told the facts. Yes, we've got to protect the vulnerable. Yes, we can't let it run amok so that a lot of elderly people especially die. But honestly, get a grip. Stephen Marshall was tweeting out today all these photos of these empty roads. You know, I'm so proud. We're all so proud of each other because we're just hiding under our beds. And there were 0 cases. I give up.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, we're the heretics, of course, for pointing out the absurdity of the games around all of this. You know, this is ironic, right? There's greater punishment for us pointing out their BS than them actually causing the pain that they are. Bridget McKenzie's a national senator, and she had to go through a fair amount of lockdown. In fact, she's still got a hard border between 2 parts of 2 states that don't have any virus. But congratulations to South Australia. They've beaten it in 12 hours.
Look, Paul, I've loved listening to you and now Chris's outrage around yet another city-centric, poll-driven premier locking down their state and significantly impacting businesses. We agreed to have a COVID hotspot definition as a national cabinet, and here at the first sign of an outbreak, we're ignoring our own agreement. I find it quite incredible. I've been saying for months we've got 3 more days till the Victorian and South Wales state borders open, and we cannot wait to have our communities reconnected. But for Victorians that are on that regional border with South Australia that's only just been recently opened up after nearly 7 months, to once again have communities cut in half, kids unable to get to school, it's just ridiculous and not based on medical evidence. I think we'd all accept it if it was based on medical evidence. But really, again, an overreaction, as you said, to the fear that's being spun out there in the community. We need to treat this virus seriously. Obviously, it's highly contagious, and we've seen some devastating impacts globally. But we also need to shut down those isolated outbreaks quickly and swiftly in isolation so that the rest of our community and those, like for me as a NAB, need to stay open. And all your viewers on Win TV, big shout out, will be very, very furious, and I'm sure banging their heads against the corrugated water tank tonight if they're on that South Australia-Victoria border.
Bloody oath they will be. Bronwyn, you know, the politics of this and the fact that these leaders are endlessly rewarded for going over the top. Crossroads Hotel was 40 cases, they didn't know what it was, they didn't shut the street. This was 23 cases, that's actually 22, yet they shut the state for 6 days for the Radelaide strain of the virus.
Seriously, Paul, you have to say, thank God for Gladys.
Agreed.
New South Wales is the strongest economic state in the Commonwealth. New South Wales is the most populous state in the Commonwealth. And thank God we've got a Premier who is prepared to say that if this powerhouse of economy and jobs closes down, then the rest of Australia is going to be in a really deep trouble. And so when you look at the policies that the other premiers are putting together, you can seriously say they're about as sensible as trying to put a saddle on a cow. They seriously just do not get it.
Richard tried to do that once and it was hilarious. Richard, tell us about that. Yeah, go.
Did you wipe the inside of it as well? Okay. You're quick, aren't you?
That's when the common sense kicks in. Make sure you watch it. You did a lot of work about
He's quick, isn't he, Dean?
about the types of people who have South Australian area codes on their phones. That's the hospitals they go to. However, the line in the sand. And it used to be South Australia had the line in the sand saying you can't travel. Now it's Victoria saying you can't travel. And again, in reaction to what? In reaction to 22 cases.
Mate, down in the southeast of South Australia, I have a lot of relatives and friends down there. People just travel across the border. The South Australians and Victorians don't have a property either side of the border. We got quite a few people out earlier this year. But now, South Australians are banned going into Victoria, and Victorians are banned coming into South Australia. And guess what? Neither of them had any infections yesterday. It's just so nutty, and it causes so much hardship for people. I can't begin to tell you. You know all about it, especially across the Queensland, New South Wales border. But just on these anomalies, these ridiculous laws you were talking about earlier, up until just last week in Queensland, you were not allowed to dance at a wedding, right? You can now dance at a wedding if it's outdoors or something like that. But up until recently, you were not allowed to dance at a wedding unless you were the married couple. But the Queensland Health Department issued COVID-safe guidelines for group sex at brothels. So quite literally in Queensland. In Queensland, if you're at a wedding and went up and asked the bridesmaid for a dance, you'd be breaking the law. But it was perfectly legal to say, come across the road with me, we'll get in some group sex in the brothel. The country's off the planet.
I'm with you, I love this show. But also, Bronwyn, what about, let's get to this too. Now I get it, it's their moment in the sun, and frankly, without boring everyone too much, essentially, most of the state premiers have fallen for a messaging strategy that has been well perfected during natural disasters, which is you stand next to the commissioner of the day, be it SES or be it fires, and then you basically are the MC at the press conference, and then they tell you what's going on. But of course, they're responding to an obvious emergency that's measurable and all the rest of it. But these public health bureaucrats whose solution to the road toll will be no one can drive, fat taxes, all that stuff. They're being pushed to the front. But can we just deal with the patronising way some of these people present themselves? I'm sure she's a lovely lady. I know she's very popular on Twitter, which means off with my head. But the sort of, all right, boys and girls, let me explain how the Rona works. It's so childish.
Well, it's all very well. We sit here and we laugh at those examples, and they are ridiculous. But the bottom line is, as I said before, the Prime Minister has elevated those premiers to the heads of many states. He is now their equal. This is middle of
Thank you.
A broken country with a champagne. I don't like it.
No, it's horrible. And the framers of our Constitution gave the federal government powers to ensure that we did not break up into many nations, that we remained the Australian Federation. And the Commonwealth government won't use any of those powers. Why? Why won't they use any of those powers? That's the question we've really got to start answering. Is that because they've got an election coming up probably at the end of next year, and if they seem to be the bad guy, then they won't get elected? Is that the problem? Well, when they take off the JobKeeper payments in March, backlash is going to be one hell of a backlash.
I'll bet you $5 that they'll be away with extended passport.
Exactly. And they'll go right up to the door of an election at the end of next year. So, but don't...
Because the idiot premiers who actually reduce demand in their economy all get re-elected, and then if you remove the thing that helps protect those that have been damaged by the reduction in demand, they put it in your lap. That's it. Queensland expects unemployment to get worse, and they're closed. New South Wales is open, can deal with a spot fight, and went up by 1.5%.
It was that predictable, Paul. So why was it allowed to drift? It has to be asked.
I'm with you. All right, I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to get back. There's plenty more in a second. Sorry, Bridget, because I took about 50 minutes without a break last night, and I got the talking to today. So support these businesses.
This program brought to you by Compaq.
Because we live here, Jan lives here. Super producers have just told me that Premier Marshmallow has just put out the big thank you video, so he's sort of going for the donut thing. He was going for it to be the social media star. We'll show that video in a moment or two's time instead. Looking forward to talking to Catherine McGregor about the most serious issues today, that being the war crimes allegations against Australian soldiers, about what we need to learn, what is also an overreaction here, not to this point, but what could be an overreaction in some of those that are going to want to really dent the Defence Force. We'll talk about that with her a little bit later. But in the meantime, we're here with Richard McKenzie, of course, National Senator in Victoria, and even though she gets the ability to cross into Albury anytime she wants, she still has to sit a 40-minute queue to do so. No one's got virus on either side of the queue, but there she is. She waits till Monday to be able to friendly move about. Chris Kenny, I think, by rights, are you out of hotel quarantine this weekend?
I've got 2 more sleeps here. I've been tested 3 times, COVID negative, but I've got 2 more sleeps before I can see my children and lovely wife before sunrise on Saturday, hopefully.
Now, you know that when you get home, no complaining about being tired. You have to do all of the chores that you put off for about 6 weeks, mate. You've got to rebuild the cubby house. If I hear you going to bed before midnight when you get home, on Selena's behalf...
Could you have a word to Mark Garvin and Paul Whittaker at Sky First? Because I've constructed this studio, I do a TV night day, I'm writing for the Oz, and all I've done so far is ring me up about an additional project.